This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and our Torah service today. We're blessed to have this guidance, this instruction, the Torah, and the instruction it gives us to live our lives in a righteous way. It's an interesting parsha today, Tisa, which means when you take. And some of the conditions of doing a census, it's interesting when you start looking at what's permitted and what isn't allowed in taking a census. David took one and he wasn't supposed to. He tried to fix it. There was a couple taken in the wilderness. And this particular census involved counting of the contribution of the children of Israel. They gave a particular amount and they were able to identify how many of the congregation were over 20 years old. Reminds me of one time I went to Carlsbad Caverns and we went for the evening when the bats fly out of the cave. And one of the people there asked the ranger, I don't think it was me, how many bats come out of the cave? And he says, well, we'll let you take a poll. You count their feet and we'll divide it by 2. So when Yahweh said to take a census of the children of Israel, for their enrollment, each shall pay a ransom for himself, a ransom to Yahweh for his life. So to the census, so no plague comes to them when the census is being made. Everyone subject to the census must pay half a shekel. Interesting that everyone only had to pay half a shekel, whether you were poor and all you had was half a shekel, or you were very wealthy and had many half shekels. If it was a half a shekel each, then they could keep a better accounting. And this half shekel will be set aside for Yahweh. It said those that, and some translations say those that cross over. And I saw that, and it said cross over, we're not crossing over yet. We're still in Sinai. So I looked a little closer, and it said those who pass through the census. So those that were 20 years older or older are to give an offering to Yahweh. And the rich are not to give more, and the poor are not to give less. So this is to atone for your lives. And when we think about the journey that the Israelites had through the wilderness, they had to do a lot of atoning. They weren't exactly the best of characters at some points in their journey. And then it says here, receive the atonement money from the Israelites and use it for the service of the tent of meeting. The tent of meeting. Oh, okay. That's going to be discussed here in a minute, but what tent of meeting? It will be a memorial for the Israelites before Yahweh, making atonement for your lives. There was another census in 2 Chronicles. Joash, he noticed that the temple was going into disrepair. He asked the Levites to get together an offering and Second Chronicles 24, verse 4 through 16. Every man whose heart inspired him. Oh, wait a minute. This was the census that they used to repair the temple, but when we're looking at the tent of meeting, we got to realize where we're at chronologically. So I jumped ahead and I'm looking at chapter 35, verse 21. Every man whose heart inspired him brought the portion or the contribution to Yahweh for the work of the tent of appointment and for all its service and for the holy garments. So before Yahweh started collecting gold, silver, bronze, fine linen, skins, hooks, planks, bars, pillars, sockets, etc., building the ark, we still haven't built the tent yet. The tabernacle hasn't been constructed yet. But the next verse talks about, verse 18, make a bronze basin with a bronze stand for washing. Place it between the tent of meeting and the altar. And verse 20 says, whenever they enter the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water so that they will not die. So this was kind of a mikvah, preparing the priests to enter the tabernacle, And then the next section here is on the anointing oil, verse 22. Make the following fine spices, myrrh, cinnamon, calamus, all according to the sanctuary shekel, a hin of olive oil. And verse 25 says, and you shall make these into sacred anointing oil. He was directing Moses to be the perfumer and make the holy anointing oil. And then verse 25 says it will be the sacred anointing oil. So we're looking ahead again. It will be when we build the tabernacle. Then use it to anoint the tent, the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering, utensils, the basin, and you shall consecrate them so they'll be holy. And whatever touches them will be holy. Verse 30 says, and you shall anoint Aaron and his sons and consecrate them so they may serve me as priests. Again, you shall. So he's looking ahead. He's an Elohim of order. He's preparing everything. This is to be my sacred anointing oil for the generations to come. Do not pour it on anyone else's body, and do not make another oil using the same formula. It is sacred, and you are to consider it sacred. Whoever makes perfume like this and puts it on anyone other than a priest must be cut off from their people. So there were conditions on this, and also the next section is on the incense. And he instructs Moses again to take fragrances, gum resin, oinka, galbanum, pure frankincense, and make a fragrant blend of incense. It says, and you shall. So he's directing Moses to be in charge of this blending of these spices and fragrances. Grind some of it to powder and place it in front of the ark of the covenant in the tent of meeting. Okay? So the next verse says, and it shall be holy to you. So again, he's preparing the incense for a future date when they're going to have the ark in the tent, in the tabernacle. Again, there's a precaution there. Whoever makes incense like it to enjoy its fragrance must be cut off from their people. Who's going to do all this work? Naturally, Yahweh has chosen people. He chose us to be part of his flock. He set us apart to be Israel. He instructed Yitro to appoint men of valor to help judge. He appoints pastors, elders, deacons, staff. We got David, got Bryant, got Sherry, all our staff that comes to support us, Kendra. Leaders in our homes, like our brother Ray talked about. The children are taught by the mother. She's covered by her husband. He's covered by Yeshua, and Yeshua is covered by Yahweh. It's not an order of dominance, but authority and responsibility to honor this hierarchy. We must be hearing, listening, learning, and teaching. We also need to be obedient. In Matthew 5:19, it says, greater in the kingdom. Matthew 5:17, Yeshua didn't come to destroy the Torah or the prophets, but to complete them. He referred to them as commands or commandments. And verse 18 says, till heaven and earth pass, not one yod or one tittle will be changed. And verse 19 is a important part. Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom. So I've always kind of questioned that statement, knowing where we came from and what we were doing back then and where we're at now. Where are we now? We don't know exactly, but we want to follow this instruction. We don't want to break any of these commandments, and we want to teach what's proper and not teach false doctrine. So he's chosen us, and he chose some craftsmen, but he's chosen some people to stand up and serve, just like he did with Yitro. Men of valor. Men like Gilbert. Men like Pastor. Men like our deacons. So that Yahweh will shine his face upon you and give you his shalom. Talking about shiny faces, we're going to see another one here in a few minutes when we get to the end of the parsha. But when his face shines on you, he's smiling. I remember an old commercial where there was an Indian chief looking out at the river and there's trash flowing down the river. That's when pollution was a big concern. And they showed kind of the back of the chief, and he's looking out over the river, and they pan around, and he has a tear running down his eye. And that's kind of the way I see Yahweh when we're not following his instructions. He sees everything. So we want him to shine his face on us and smile and glow. I recently talked to one of my cousins after my mom's funeral, and he looks just like my Uncle Frank. His name is Frank too. And I mentioned to him how much he looked like my Uncle Frank, and how much a lot of people told me I looked just like my dad. My dad looked pretty good for 88. But my cousin told me something interesting. He says, yeah, I wake up every morning and I look in the mirror and I see my dad and I smile at him and he smiles back. And I wave at him and he waves back. So Yahweh chose these craftsmen, and let me see here. I'm sure there were very innovative workers during that time in the wilderness, because they pretty much had to create everything. Verse 1, let's see. Chapter 31, okay, verse 1. Yahweh said to Moses, Vedeber Yahweh al Moshe. See, I have chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. So Judah was called the tribe of praise. Bezalel means in the protection of Adonai. So he had an important role from his birth. And there's a pretty interesting description here. He's a grandson of Hur, of the family of Caleb of Judah, and a skillful worker in metals and precious stones. He was assigned to be the chief architect for construction of the tabernacle, the implements, the priestly garments, oils, and incense. He's not to be confused with the son of Pahat Moab, who put away his foreign wife. When we see a name in the Bible, there's probably several people that are connected to that name, so don't confuse them. That other guy wasn't him. He probably wasn't a skilled craftsman either. So he appointed him to use his attributes. They're listed there. He had a godly spirit. He had wisdom. He had insight. He had knowledge. He had intelligence. And he was diligent with every craft. He was a weaver. He was a goldsmith, silversmith, worked with copper and bronze, stone cutting, wood carving. So he was very skilled. Some of us have a lot of skills. Some of us need some work, need some mentoring, instruction. So he also, in verse 6, it says, "Moreover, I have appointed Aholiab, son of Amishak, of the tribe of Dan, to help him." And Dan is the tribe of judgment. And when I went to look for the description of his name, it means his father's tent, which he's going to be a tent builder. But the rest of the description only said he aided Bezalel. So I guess he was his intern, his understudy, his assistant. So Yahweh knows what your attributes are, and he picks you. He sees where you're at. He sees where you can lead and where you can serve. So there's a section here starting at verse 12, and Pastor calls them a parentheses verse. And verse 12 says, Yahweh said to Moses, say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths, plural. And it also implies there that even during the construction of the tabernacle, we'll work on it 6 days and we'll rest. This will be a sign between me and you for generations to come. For how long? Forever. A sign, an oath, O-W-T-H, not O-A-T-H, but that's a Hebrew. So that you may know that I am Yahweh, who makes you holy. When we think of the Sabbath, He chose us to honor His Sabbath. It makes us holy because we honor it and because we make it holy. If we don't honor it, then there's some consequences here. But we talk about the set-apart nature that He's brought us to. And when we think about the Mishkan, the tabernacle, He created everything. He created the universe. And it's massive and there's no end to it. But He created one holy place, one sacred place, and that's a Mishkan. Likewise with the Shabbat. Time continues, time goes on, time 1 minute after the next. Yesterday's gone, tomorrow's not here yet. But today is the Shabbat. and He set it aside for us. And we are to guard the Sabbath and make it holy, make it kadosh. And we do by being here, through obedience, by not working, by not dishonoring Him, by not causing others to work. We keep the Sabbath because of its holiness to us. The holiness is transferred to those who keep it for generations to come. It is a mark, a sign of distinction. It goes on to say that anyone who desecrates it is to be put to death, and those who do work on that day must be cut off from their people. For 6 days, work is to be done. The seventh day is a Sabbath rest. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day is to be put to death. The Israelites, verse 16, are to observe the Sabbath, celebrating it for the generations to come as a lasting covenant. It will be a sign between me and the Israelites forever. In 6 days, Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day, He rested and was refreshed. I like the way Jonathan Sattel puts it. Y descansó. So, when we look at this verse, who is He addressing? He's talking to the Israelites, the wanderers. But since this is for generations to come, who else does it apply to? There was a lot of other people groups that came out of that tribe. Many of the descendants of Israel, the descendants of Abraham. Does this commandment apply to others, other believers, or other non-believers, or Israel only? I don't know. We know that it applies to us. The last verse there says, when Yahweh finished speaking to Moshe on Mount Sinai, He gave him the 2 tablets of the covenant, the tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of Elohim. So verse 32 takes a different turn. And of course, we can always learn from things that happen. It starts with concern about the people. They were concerned about Moses. They said, he's been gone a long time. What happened to this fellow? He had been communing with Yahweh for 40 days. That was kind of the timeline that they were following, and apparently they weren't counting the days, or they lost track of time. But they thought he was taking a long time to come down from the mountain, so they gathered around Aaron. It says they gathered around Aaron. It makes you wonder how they gathered around him. And said, come make us gods who will go before us. So when we look at the way it's phrased there, they want somebody to lead them. They had Moses that went before them, but he wasn't there now. So they asked Aaron to make a god that will go before us. It says there, as for this fellow Moses who brought us out of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. So Aaron, and there's some stipulation here that he was stalling for Moses. So he says, okay, take off the golden earrings that your wives, sons, and daughters are wearing. And I kind of read through that and didn't think twice about it. So wait a minute, it says your wives, your sons and daughters. So I guess the guys are wearing earrings too. They started a fad. I think it's still around. So the people took off their jewelry, brought it to Aaron. He took what they handed them, and it says here he made it into an idol, cast in the shape of a calf, fashioned with a tool. So it's a great sin, and we'll see that brought up over and over on this parsha, but to worship an idol, it's even a greater sin to make one. And some of the commentaries say that he just got it in a cloth and threw it in the fire and out came a calf. And that's what Aaron said. But there was a lot of, I'm sure there was a lot of infiltration in the ones that gathered around Aaron. They probably had could have had some sorcery or some other influences, because cows are worshipped a lot back in those days in Egypt and other religions. So it says he cast a calf, and I looked in 16 different translations, and it says pretty much the same thing. So Aaron saw this, and he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, tomorrow there'll be a festival. So if things weren't going bad enough, he just had to make it worse. So the next day the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterwards they sat down to PG-13, eat, drink, and got up to indulge in revelry. And Yahweh, of course he sees everything, he said to Moshe, go down, because your people, whom you brought out of Egypt, have become corrupt. Now they're his people. But when you look at the way he said it, it's like, we're done here. You got to go. His presence with Yahweh was just incredible. I mean, he was able to commune with Yahweh, but when Yahweh said, basically tell him, go away. Go deal with your people. And then when he went down, they have turned away. This is interesting here. I finally found it. I said, aha. So Yahweh sent Moses because his people have become corrupt. They have been quick, verse 8, to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol. So when in some translations it says they have turned away from the way that I have commanded them. The way of Yahweh, the way that we're diligently following. And of course they bowed down and sacrificed to it. And Moses said, these are stiff-necked people. I mean, we've been dealing with them already. They have a nature of being rebellious. But Yahweh told him, leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them, verse 10, and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation. He told Moshe, we're going to have you as the leader of a great nation. But Moses, of course, as he's done so many times, atoning for the people, he sought the favor of Yahweh. He said, why should your anger burn against your people whom you brought out of Egypt? With great power and might. The Egyptians said that they took him out there to let him, to wipe them off the face of the earth. Why are you going to satisfy that? Turn from your fierce anger. Relent and do not bring disaster on your people. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore on yourself. I will make you a descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants this land I promised them, and I will make their inheritance forever. Remember, you made a promise. You made a covenant with Abraham. So Yahweh relented and did not bring his people the disaster that he had threatened. So Moses turned back down and went down the mountains with the 2 tablets in his hands, inscribed on both sides, the work of Yahweh. And when he got to the bottom of the mountain, first person to greet him, Joshua. Joshua said, I hear the noise of the people and it sounds like war in the camp. Joshua was over there on the foot of the mountain. The Israelites were over there reveling. So he said, it sounds like war. I think that's really interesting because it did kind of turn that way for the revelers, some of them. But Moses said, it's not the sound of victory, it's not the sound of defeat, it's the sound of singing that I hear. So when he approached the camp, he saw the people dancing, and his anger flared up, and he threw the tablets down, breaking them to pieces. That was a huge awakening. The people saw that. There's our covenant, now it's broken. So he took the calf, destroyed it, ground it into powder, scattered it on the water, made the people drink it. And then he said to Aaron, what did these people do to you that led you to do such a great sin? And Aaron said, you know how prone these people are to evil. They told me to make a god to go before us. For Moses, we don't know what happened to him. So I told him, whoever has jewelry, bring it to me. And I threw it in the fire, and out came this calf. So there should have been some consequences, right, Phil? We won't know till we can ask that question of Yeshua when we're at his right hand. So Moses goes on to say, you let them get out of control. And it was humiliating to the leadership. So Moses had to do some damage control. Verse 25, he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, whoever is for Yahweh, come to me. And all the Levites rallied to him. They did not worship the calf. They were loyal to Yahweh, they were loyal to Moses, and they went and stood by him. And as usual, Moses says, let me see what Yahweh has to say about this situation. So he went and said, okay, Yahweh, what do we do? He did that many times, consulted the experts. So Yahweh came and told him, each man strap a sword to your side, go back and forth through the camp, from one end to the other, killing his brother, friend, and neighbor. The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. You think about 3,000, it's a pretty small percentage when you're talking about several million people. But Yahweh had been watching them. He knew who the instigators were. So Moses tells the Israelites, you've been set apart, for you went against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day. So the next day Moses said to the people, you committed a great sin, but now I will go up, and perhaps I will make atonement for your sin. He didn't say again, but so Moses went back up. So he pleaded with Elohim, please forgive their sin. And if you can't, Yahweh had told him, I'll make a great nation out of you. But Moses stood in for them and said, if you cannot forgive them, blot me out of the book you have written. I'll take the responsibility. I'll take the blame. Put it all on me. So Yahweh replied, and he said, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of the book. So go and lead the people to the place that I spoke of, and my angel will go before you, my messenger. He goes on to say, however, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin. Yahweh struck the people with a plague. There's not a lot of information that I could find on what the plague was or how long it lasted or who was afflicted. But they did receive a plague for what they had done, for what they and Aaron had made. That might have been part of his punishment. Chapter 33. Oh, okay. When he said, when the time comes for me to punish, he's saying, wait till your dad gets home. I'm sure we've had that lecture before. So, chapter 33, they're leaving this place. Everything's topsy-turvy. There's just so much confusion and there's so much conviction. The people were saying, wow, we made a big one. We made a big mistake. And Yahweh said to go up to the land I promised on an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to your descendants. So there's another clue that the descendants were going to enter the land. Goes on to say, I will send a messenger before you and drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Go up to the land flowing with milk and honey. But there's always conditions. I will not go with you because you are stiff-necked people and I might destroy you on the way if I do. He knew that they were going to fall again. When the people heard these distressing words, they began to mourn, and no one put on any ornaments. I thought that was interesting. I mean, we think about ornaments, putting them on our Christmas tree, right? Or we used to. There were some other translations that said jewelry. It was not a time to be prideful, time of humility. There was another translation that said, do not put on your armor. We want to be exposed, so we want him to be able to punish us. So he told them to take off their ornaments. So now Moses would go and pitch a tent outside the camp, some distance away, it said, calling it the tent of meeting. What I kind of feel like is that the kavod had left the camp. He did not feel like he could pitch a tent with these people, with these stiff-necked people. He was just not really feeling like it's not here. Anyone inquiring of Yahweh would go to his tent outside the camp. And whenever Moses went out to the tent, the people would rise and stood at the entrance of their tents, watching Moses until he entered the tent. So they were realizing that they had to respect this man. So when Moses went to the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance. So there's their confirmation. Whenever the pillar was there, the people stood and worshipped at the entrance of their tents. And Yahweh would speak to Moshe face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses returned to the camp. And at the end of verse 11, it said, but his young age, Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. Joshua was waiting for him at the base of the mountain when he came down with the tablets. Joshua would stay in his tent and guard it. Joshua was being groomed to become the leader. So verse 12, Moshe said, you've been telling me to lead these people. Verse 13 says, teach me your ways that I may know you. And remember, this is the nation of your people. He was a very humble man. He goes on to say that Yahweh knew him by name. And Moses said, well, now show me your glory. So this is when Yahweh said, I will proclaim my name, Yahweh, in your presence. I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will have mercy and compassion. But another condition, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. So Yahweh had an idea. He said, there's a little place over here where you can stand in a rock. It says, on a rock. I will put you in a cleft of the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed. And there's many pictures of some rocks up there on the area that they claim to be Sinai with a big cleft in it. There's one up by our homestead up by Trementina. It's kind of narrow cleft, so got to be a little smaller than me to squeeze in there. So there's some new stone tablets in chapter 34. Yahweh told Moses, go chisel out some stone tablets like the first ones, and I will write on them the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. So he told him, be ready in the morning, then come on to the mountain. Present yourself to me there on top of the mountain. No one is to come with you. So Moses chiseled out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and he carried them up. And the cloud came down and stood there with him. And Yahweh again proclaimed his name. And he proclaimed his attributes. Compassionate and gracious Elohim, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. He does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children of their children for their sin, of their parents for the 3rd and 4th generation. And Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshipped. Master, he said, I have found favor in your eyes. Then let the master go with us. This is a stiff-necked people, but you're forgiving our wickedness and our sin. Please take us as your inheritance. So Yahweh said, okay, I'm making a covenant with you before all your people. I will do wonders never before done. So how much more? I mean, the plagues, the exodus from Egypt, the miracles that happened at the Red Sea and in the wilderness so far, bringing water and manna and feeding them. So stay tuned. There's more to come. It says forever, right? We can look forward to this. We can receive it. I think this is where, let me get a little reference here on something. This made me recall from Exodus 6. I call them the I wills. Exodus 6, 6 through 8. Yahweh says, therefore say unto the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rescue you from their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. And I will take you for me, for a people, and I will be your Elohim, and you shall know that I am the Elohim that brings you out from under the burdens, and I will bring you into the land I swear and gave Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for an inheritance. He talks here about, and he stresses again, do not make any idols. Celebrate the festival of unleavened bread. Another parentheses section. 7 days eat bread made without yeast, as I commanded you to do. Do this at the appointed time in the month of Aviv. And the first offspring shall be mine, her first fruits. And he goes on to say, celebrate the festival of weeks. And then celebrate the festival of ingathering, Sukkot. And these are the pilgrim feasts. We're supposed to gather, the men are supposed to make a pilgrimage and gather and not come empty-handed and present themselves in front of Adonai. But where do they pilgrimage to? They don't have a temple yet. They don't have a tabernacle yet. They're still out there wandering in the wilderness. But he's preparing them for this day, just like he's preparing us for when we have to go and serve. So, Yahweh said to Moshe, write down these words, for in accordance to these words I have a covenant with you and with Israel. So Moses was there for 40 days without eating bread or drinking water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 words. So verse 29, when Moses came down from Sinai with the 2 tablets, the new tablets of the covenant in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with Yahweh. So when they saw his face was glowing, they were afraid. And Moses said, come here, don't be afraid, come near me. So Aaron brought the leaders and the community back to him, and he spoke to them. And afterward all the Israelites came near him, and he gave them all the commandments. And when Moses finished speaking, he put a veil over his face. But whenever he entered Yahweh's presence, he removed the veil until he came out. So when he came out, he told the Israelites that what had been commanded, and they saw his face was radiant. Moses would put the veil back on his face. During the time of the captivity, there was a need for some fellowship, some study. So the Israelites weren't allowed to read the Torah. So they read from the prophets. And this one for this week is on one of my favorite verses. I think it's the very first one I taught about here many, many years ago. Elijah and Obadiah and King Ahab and his wife and the confrontation they had up on Mount Carmel. And it was another example of apostasy, of rebellion, of idol worship. And Elijah was victorious. He rescued the prophets. Jezebel only wanted to wipe them all out. She wanted to wipe out all of the people that weren't willing to follow their pagan beliefs. But Elijah prevailed. The Haftarah is about the prophet Elijah's confrontation of the evil King Ahab and the subsequent power encounter between Yahweh and the prophets of Baal. This is another case demonstrating the proclivity of human nature towards idolatry and the Elohim of Israel's vindication. One of the verses in the Brit Hadashah, 2 Corinthians 3, just to summarize it, it says, you are our letter written in our hearts. We don't need the stone tablets. We have the Torah. It's written in our hearts, known and read by all men. You are a letter of Messiah, written by the Ruach of the living Elohim, not on tablets of stone, but on fleshly tablets of the heart. Our confidence comes from Elohim. And it says if you're following the way of Yahweh, you're living in freedom. We've freed ourselves from captivity. We've freed ourselves from bondage. We've freed ourselves from paganism. We freed ourselves from false doctrine. And we're all free. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's see how I'm doing here. I'm going to go ahead and close. The next parsha is going to go over the construction of the Mishkan. So this one was about the preparation of the elements that were going into it. Father, we bless this congregation. We lift them up to you to guard them and protect them and continue to lead them in your way. Lead them in the way of Yahweh, Haderek Yahweh. We have chosen to take this path. We have walked in many ways through many different challenges, and we have completed our day of preparation to be at this place where we're at now, and to learn and understand the foundation of your word. The foundation is the Torah and the instruction on how to live our lives and be righteous in your presence. Yevarecha Yahweh vaish merecha. Air Yahweh panavelecha vikunecha. Isa Yahweh panavelecha vayasem lecha shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh shine his face upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up his face upon you and give you his shalom. Shalom, shalom. Shavua Tov. Have a blessed day.
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or TorahUnleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en TorahUnleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.